this Peace Corps volunteer for 2 years in the Dominican Republic. And right in like the middle kind of my service, my aunt got really sick out here in Colorado. I lived in a small community in the DR, and we had about, within 2 weeks, we had about like 10 people pass away from like very different things. We also had like a hurricane at the same time. And then we had like another series of like deaths, like about a month after that in the same community. And so that's kind of like the trajectory of everything going on. But really the big things was my aunt got really sick, and she was all the way out here. And my family's always been small, and we hadn't quite like lived through those things together. And then one of the deaths was one of my students that I was closest to there, who was the coach of the basketball team that we formed together. She was a neighbor, she's a friend. She's one of the few people that really understood my Spanish. She would like translate for me, and she'd be like, I think what Manda's trying to say is, and she was just like an amazing youth. She's like the reason that I do the work with youth. She's like the star you think of, or I think of. And she completed suicide during that time period. Like morning, I had like seen her the night before. She just graduated high school the week before, and I left the community for the day, and I get a phone call, and I just like couldn't understand it. I was like, my Spanish must be wrong. That's like not what was said, like it can't be. And like kind of essentially ran back to the community. And then like from there on out, like I felt like life became around mourning for the next, like, I don't even know, however many months, like months. Because in the community, even though they're used to like a good amount of death, like we'd had it, but to have a youth pass away and in that manner, even people there like couldn't kind of reckon with it. Like school was shut down, people were all wearing black and white, no music was played for like much longer than is like part of the culture down there. It felt all encompassing. And at the same time, my aunt was really sick, but I couldn't be back here. And then, like I said, there was like a hurricane and a bunch of other things that like it felt like uprooting after uprooting. And I have never really felt so like desolate and like empty. And I've also never felt so held by the community that I lived in, who like, right, I'm not part of that culture. Mourning is really different. Like, who's to say my relationship with Nicole was even as big as I think it was, because I only knew her for a year. But I was like held by all of that. People kind of just like helped me exist. The Donia, the mom I lived with, like helped me do everything in those time periods. Like people let me cry, but they also leaned on me to be like, well, what are we gonna do with the youth now? Like, how are we gonna move from this, Fellow Peace Corps volunteers, I like felt really called to do something within the week after she passed away for like the youth in the community, because my main role down there was to work with youth. And so even though I was going through my own mourning, I felt a sense of responsibility, like why else am I down there if not that? And so some volunteers from the other part of the region near me, they came and helped me. I was like, I want to put on an event and I can't do this alone. And I was like able to say that, and was met with like not needing too many questions and like all hands on deck. And we watched Space Jams because Nicole had her and I were planning to watch that, like put on that movie for everyone. She loved Michael Jordan. She had started the basketball team with me. And so we made like popcorn, and we did it all in like the health clinic there. And so like it felt being held even just by the energy of like the youth, and knowing that I was like part of that, at least in some way. And then I had my mom got really sick before too. And then a similar thing had happened where like people started coming out of the woodwork. And it's like some people that you think are going to be there for you may not be, but other people that I hadn't talked to in years had noticed a few of my social media posts and had enough care in their heart, and like moved from the awkwardness of not talking to me in a year to email me or text me or be like, hey, it really seems like you're going through a lot. And they told me like things they saw in me that at that moment I didn't quite see. And so I started like a list of like, I screenshotted a lot of those things and I saved them like in a folder on my computer, so that when I'm having a bad moment now, I can return to that feeling of being held. And I think so it was like people from across the country, it was people from across the world, it was people that weren't like me, Dominicans, and I think the biggest way that felt held was not having to ask or know exactly what I needed for people to be there, and for people to not be there physically, like phones, maybe not physically not, but there was some way that felt a connection that even when I felt the most alone in the back of my head, I like knew that there was people that were my people.